I have a few short reflections. The first really to emphasize, and several speakers have already referred to this, is that the GHF, this supposed humanitarian mechanism, is no less than a death multiplier in Gaza. MSF has just released a report where they describe this mechanism as a process of orchestrated killing. Approximately a quarter of the Palestinians that have been killed since the introduction of the GHF in that period have been killed in and around locations managed by the GHF. What we see when we look at the pattern of injuries since October of 2023 is that the increase in injuries between May and June of this year, the steep increase in the number of injuries, we haven't seen that since the first 3 months of the genocide. So we're seeing a dramatic increase in the number of Palestinians who are being injured as a result of Israeli military violence, and that is unmatched since December, January of 2024. I've spoken to colleagues, senior ER doctors working in Nuseirat, Deir al-Balah, Khan Yunis in the last couple of days, and they describe extreme violence. Many of us have seen the footage from the ER rooms at Nasser Hospital and Al-Aqsa. Again, imagery that we haven't seen really, other than in the worst. Sorry, we have seen, of course, but that parallels the worst days of the genocide. Tens, if not hundreds, of patients that are being treated on the floor in the emergency rooms. Really just utterly horrific conditions for healthcare workers to be working in, and of course for Palestinians themselves to be subjected to. One colleague of mine, he told me that he'd had to insert 50 chest tubes in a single day. In many other places, certainly for someone who spends a career in emergency medicine in the United Kingdom, you may not insert 50 chest tubes in an entire career. Certainly not in a single day. I mean, it is just incomprehensible the scale and severity of violence that is being inflicted on the Palestinian people. The second thing I want to mention is to bring us back to this language of the humanitarian alibi. Really, the stage of the genocide that we have entered into now is the stage in which the language, if not the practice, of humanitarianism is being used as a paper-thin cover for the continuation of genocidal violence. And the reality is that many states that believe absolutely everything that Israel promotes by way of its propaganda campaign, many states have fallen for this veneer of humanitarianism. We often call this the humanitarian alibi. And I have to say that I don't like that terminology because we generally use the word alibi to refer to a believable story that absolves an individual of the accusation that is leveled against them, or absolves them of the crimes that they're accused of committing. In this case, there's absolutely nothing believable about Israel's co-option of the language of humanitarianism. They have co-opted the vernacular of humanitarianism, but really what they've created is paper thin at best, this pretext for the continuation of the genocide by other means, just long enough to deflect growing condemnation by appearing to engage in acts of charity and benevolence, which then allows them the time to amplify their strategy of military violence elsewhere in Gaza and by other means. What we have to appreciate, of course, is that this discussion around the provision of food, and as our colleagues have emphasized, it is just food, not water, not shelter, not medicines, is occurring at the very same time as Netanyahu is explicitly stating plans to impose total military occupation over the Gaza Strip, and of course to continue to ethnically cleanse the remaining population of Gaza towards the south into this so-called humanitarian city. I want to reiterate two final points, if I may, Nada. The penultimate point is to really reiterate that by the GHF's own admission, its strategy is inadequate. And Anthony has already emphasized this, that the number of meals and the calorific content of those meals is inadequate. In the recent IPC reports, they say exactly the same thing. If I may just quote very quickly, food aid shipments have been highly inadequate, and our analysis, the IPC analysis, of the food packages supplied by the GHF shows that their distribution plan would lead to mass starvation, even if it was able to function without the appalling levels of violence that have been reported. So even if it functioned to the greatest extent possible, it would still lead to mass starvation. And this brings me to my final point, which is that the GHF is functioning exactly as it was intended to function. This is a damage and death multiplier, and it is being used to enact population transfer by creating the conditions, the coercive conditions that require that people choose between either staying in place, staying in their homes, or displacing towards the south in the hope that they can find food and water that will allow them to survive from one day to the next. And that is, of course, along with many other of Israeli actions, a war crime under international law.